It is true that there are many religions today, but does God accept all religions, a group of similar religions, or just one at a particular point in time? Religion has always been practiced by man, and the Bible records of God's approval of some and rejection of others. Before Judaism, persons like Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Melchizedek, and Job offered acceptable worship to God, while Cain and those who began to call on the name of Jehovah, as was recorded in Genesis chapter 4 verse 26, had their form of worship rejected by God. It is reasonable to conclude that God accepted one form and rejected other forms of worship. When discussing with or trying to proselytize someone who practices another religion different from yours, obviously, it is common in mild cases to hear statements like, "I cannot leave my own religion or church and join yours, never," or "Pray your own way, let me pray my own way. God will listen and answer us both." In harsh cases, however, you will be outrightly rebuffed. People are comfortable where they are and do not want to change. True, change is difficult to go through, especially when one reasons that such change isn't absolutely necessary. Or what though is the intent of worship? Is it not that God should accept it? This is the paramount criteria, not the comfort of the worshipper. If one really cares about the most favorable outcome, that is, your form of worship being acceptable in God's eyes, then whatever needs to be done must be done as soon as possible. When one reads the Bible, it is apparent that God wants to be worshipped a certain way, and He gives clear commands as to how He wants it carried out. For example, it is clear that God doesn't want idols to be used in His worship. Let's read Exodus chapter 20 verse 1 to 5a. The book of Exodus chapter 20 verse 1 to 5a reads, "Then God spoke all these words, I am Jehovah your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You must not have any other gods beside me. You must not make for yourself a carved image or a form like anything that is in the heaven above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. You must not bow down to them, nor be enticed to serve them." It is clear from these verses read that God rejects all forms of idolatry. In some houses of worship, images and idols of holy men, women, and perhaps children are still being used frequently for worship. Also, God does not accept worship that has a tinge of a religion He does not accept in it, that is, an admixture of true and false religion. Let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 21. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 21 reads, "You cannot be drinking the cup of Jehovah and the cup of demons. You cannot be partaking of the table of Jehovah and the table of demons." This verse explains that mixing a religion God accepts with one God does not accept is like simultaneously drinking the cup of Jehovah and the cup of demons, or partaking of the table of Jehovah and the table of demons. That is how God sees it. It is imperative then to ask oneself, is the way I worship acceptable to God? The Bible is clear Let's read Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3 to 6. The book of Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3 to 6 reads, "Earnestly endeavoring to maintain the oneness of the Spirit in the uniting bond of peace. One body there is, and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all." These Bible verses talk about one hope, one Lord, one faith, one God and Father of all, the elements involved in worship. One God is worshipped, one Lord is acknowledged, one hope is seen as reward of loyal service to God, one body of beliefs is observed, which is referred to as one faith. Looking through these elements, we see a recurring number, 1. This means that at any point in time or in history, God accepts only one form of worship and rejects others. What of worship from a similar group of religions? For example, Christianity has many denominations, e.g., Catholic, Protestant, and others. Many churches have their own names and claim to be distinct from others, and so on. Islam probably has sects, for example, the Sunni and the Shia Muslims, and so on. Christianity, as presently constituted, is a group of religions claiming to be Christian. Also, Islam is a group of religions claiming to be Muslim, and so on. Does God accept worship equally from all Christians or Muslims or any other religion, regardless of their sects or denominations? The answer is no. Let's consider it. Let's read Joshua chapter 22, verse 10 to 12, verse 16, verse 28 and 29, and Leviticus chapter 17, verse 8 and 9. Joshua chapter 22, verse 10 to 12 reads, "When they came to the regions of the Jordan in the land of Canaan, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan, a large, impressive altar. Later, the other Israelites heard it and said, 'Look, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar on the frontier of the land of Canaan in the region of the Jordan on the side belonging to the Israelites.' When the Israelites heard about it, the whole assembly of the Israelites congregated at Shiloh to go to war against them." Joshua chapter 22, verse 16 reads, "This is what all the assembly of Jehovah says. What is this act of unfaithfulness that you have committed against the God of Israel? You have turned back today from following Jehovah by building yourselves an altar and rebelling against Jehovah." Joshua chapter 22, verse 28 and 29 reads, "So we said, if they should say that to us and to our descendants in the future, we will then say, 'See the replica of Jehovah's altar that our forefathers made, not for burnt offerings or sacrifices, but to be a witness between you and us. It is unthinkable for us to rebel against Jehovah and to turn back today from following Jehovah by building an altar for burnt offerings, grain offerings, and sacrifices, other than the altar of Jehovah our God that is before his tabernacle." The book of Leviticus chapter 17, verse 8 and 9 reads, "You should say to them, any man of the house of Israel or any foreigner who is residing in your midst, who offers up a burnt offering or a sacrifice and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it to Jehovah must be cut off from his people. To understand these Bible verses, let's have a little backstory. Israel has 12 tribes. The Jordan River divided the land in which the Israelites dwelt into the east side and the west side. The actual land of promise, the promised land, was west of the Jordan. At the frontier of the promised land, just east of the Jordan, the Israelites defeated some kings, and because of certain reasons, Moses apportioned the lands of those defeated kings to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, 2.5 tribes. This was done on the condition that the men of war belonging to these tribes would go ahead and fight alongside their brothers belonging to the other tribes to ensure that the kingdoms west of the Jordan, the promised land, was conquered. The remaining 9.5 tribes could then receive their inheritance in the promised land, just as they, the 2.5 tribes, have received theirs on the east side of the Jordan. The book of Joshua chapter 22 describes the point when Joshua, who was leader in Israel at the time, showed gratitude and appreciation for what the 2.5 tribes had done in helping their brothers to inherit the land that God had promised them. They were then given permission to go home. Just before crossing the Jordan from west to east, they built an impressive altar by the Jordan. Now, this altar was a replica of the altar for sacrifices located in the Tabernacle. Leviticus chapter 17 verse 8 and 9 just read describes the law which states that all sacrifices must be offered on the altar located in the tabernacle wherever it is situated. Any other altar set up for sacrifices located anywhere else, even if it is a replica or carbon copy of the one in the tabernacle, would not be approved by God for offering sacrifices. In fact, anyone seen offering sacrifices on illegitimate altars will be sinning against God and killed without remorse for his sin. Because of this law, we see the reason why the Israelites, the 9.5 tribes, who had their inheritance on the west side of the Jordan, the land of Canaan, the promised land, seeing another altar being built in their premises, were agitated, thinking that the Israelites who had their inheritance on the east side of the Jordan, the 2.5 tribes, wanted to sin against God by using that altar for offering sacrifices when there was one God had already approved for that purpose in the tabernacle. Because of this, the 9.5 tribes wanted to go to war against the 2.5 tribes. A civil war almost ensued. Israelites as a whole understood that they could not be building altars willy-nilly for offering sacrifices when God already approved one altar located in the tabernacle for that purpose. In the same vein, just because a religion is similar to the one God approves and accepts, which we will call the true religion, does not necessarily mean that God would accept worship from that religion. So as we've stated earlier, God accepts worship from one religion at a particular point in time or in history, not from a group of similar religions. Even if these religions have beliefs that seem to look like the ones espoused by the true religion, if it is not the true religion itself, God will not accept worship from that religion. This explains why God does not accept worship equally from a group of similar religions. Therefore, if Christianity is the true way with Islam and others being false, then one sect or church or denomination within Christianity is rendering to God acceptable worship, with the others being false. Also, if Islam is the true religion, then one of the sects within Islam is rendering to God acceptable worship, with the rest of Islam and other religions being false. The Bible describes Judaism as the first organized religion acceptable to God. Before that, it was just individual men, like those mentioned earlier in the video, building altars here and there and giving God worship he was pleased with. However, laws, especially those specific to worship, were sparse, maybe 1 or 2 laws. If a person wanted to serve God acceptably, the person had to submit to the laws of Judaism and associate with the Israelites. If the person is a man, he had to get circumcised according to Exodus chapter 12 verse 48, which reads, "If a foreigner resides with you and he wants to celebrate the Passover to Jehovah, every male of his must be circumcised. Then he may come near to celebrate it, and he will become like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised man may eat of it." Sacrifices had to be made in Israel. Jewish festivals had to be observed in Israel. Worshippers who lived outside Israel had to travel to Israel if they intended to give God acceptable worship. To buttress this point, let's read the book of Acts of Apostles chapter 2 verse 1, verse 5 and verse 10, and Acts of Apostles chapter 8 verse 27. Acts of Apostles chapter 2 verse 1 reads, "Now, while the day of the festival of Pentecost was in progress, they were all together at the same place." Verse 5 reads, "At that time, devout Jews from every nation under heaven were staying in Jerusalem." Verse 10 reads, "Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the regions of Libya near Cyrene, sojourners from Rome, both Jews and proselytes." Acts chapter 8 verse 27 reads, "With that he got up and went, and look, an Ethiopian eunuch, a man who had authority under Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, and who was in charge of all her treasure, he had gone to Jerusalem to worship." Acts chapter 2 verse 1 shows that the festival of Pentecost was ongoing in Israel. Verses 5 and 10 show us that Jews and Judaism converts, known as proselytes, regardless of where they lived, were in Jerusalem at that time to observe the festival. Acts chapter 8 verse 27 shows us that a certain eunuch traveled from Ethiopia to Jerusalem to worship. Again, if they wanted to pray, they would pray facing the temple in Jerusalem, just like the Israelites. Let's read 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 29 and verse 41 to 43. 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 29 reads, "May your eyes be open towards this house night and day, towards the place of which you said, my name will be there, to listen to the prayer that your servant prays towards this place." 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 41 to 43 reads, "Also, concerning the foreigner who is not part of your people Israel, and who comes from a distant land because of your name, for they will hear about your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm, and he comes and prays towards this house. May you then listen from the heavens, from your dwelling place, and do all that the foreigner asks of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as your people Israel do, and may know that your name has been called on this house that I have built." These verses just read are snippets of the prayer King Solomon uttered at the inauguration of the first temple built in Jerusalem. It simply states that God would answer the prayers of Israelites and proselytes when they prayed towards the temple in Jerusalem. The prophet Daniel was thrown into the lion's den because he was obeying this law. And of course, to please God, they would have to obey all the other commandments of God. At this point, we should ask this question: why was the nation of Israel so special? To answer that, let's read Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 2. The book of Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 2 reads, "For you are a holy people to Jehovah your God, and Jehovah has chosen you to become his people, his special property, out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth." This verse explains that God chose the Israelites out of all the nations of the earth and of course taught them how to worship Him acceptably. Now, how did God view the worship practiced in other nations at this point in time? Let's read the book of Ephesians chapter 2 verse 12. The book of Ephesians chapter 2 verse 12 reads, "At that time ye were without Christ, alienated from the state of Israel, strangers to the covenants of the promise. You had no hope and were without God in the world." This verse explains that at that time, the other nations were without God in the world because they were strangers to Israel, the only practitioners of true religion at the time. Who then was the recipient of the worship or sacrifices of the other nations? Let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 20. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 20 reads, "No, but I say that what the nations sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to become sharers with the demons." This verse tells us plainly that if our sacrifices or worship does not go to God, the demons are the beneficiaries of such worship. The gravitas of the information just presented should be palpable, as worship from a religion not acceptable to God basically goes to Satan, the devil, and his demons, giving the caveat that God approves at any particular point in time worship from only one religion. Therefore, as you worship and practice your religion, you must be convinced that the way you worship is the only true way God can be worshipped, with the rest being false. This is not being fanatical or overzealous or hubristic. This conclusion should come as a result of intensive study of your religion and dispassionate introspection. Considering the example given earlier about the responses of people one wants to proselytize, you can sense from their responses that these people believe that where they are is the right place to be, or at least it is better than the religion you are advertising to them. So the conclusion that many today have decided in their minds that the religion they practice is the one true religion is not unreasonable to state with some certainty. However, a person who is unsure about the qualifications of his religion as the one true religion and persists in it, or hops from one religion to another, church hopping or mosque hopping as the case may be, is definitely not worshiping God. That person is wasting his time, and someone else, not God, is the recipient of that one's worship. Let's read the book of James chapter 1 verse 6 to 8. James chapter 1 verse 6 to 8 reads, "But let him keep asking in faith, not doubting at all. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven by the wind and blown about. In fact, that man should not expect to receive anything from Jehovah. He is an indecisive man, unsteady in all his ways." This verse is explained that a person who doubts, is indecisive and unsteady, cannot please God and receive anything from Him, including approval of His form of worship. So we bear the responsibility for the choices we make with respect to the way we choose to worship God, or in other words, the choice of our religion. Nowadays, however, a different trend seems to be gaining steam. Many people now favor the concept of having a personal relationship with God. While this is not bad and should be encouraged, when they talk about this personal relationship, they describe having a personal religion, that is, being close to God, but outside the confines of organized religion. Their rationale is based on some observations. Number 1, rank hypocrisy among the leaders and laity of organized religion. In their observation, they see the leaders of these religions not teaching and practicing the tenets of their religion, and the laity have by and large followed suit. So they reason, if those within organized religion does not bother to obey the rules and regulations of their worship, why join them due to be it peer or societal pressure? Number 2, another reason is that people belonging to organized religion tend to exhibit behaviors that can be interpreted or misinterpreted as vehement intolerance of ideas and points of view that call into question the veracity of their religion's claim of being the right way to worship God, or just question the appropriateness of a certain belief. Such discussions can get really uncomfortable and aggression might ensue. In many of these cases, aggression starts when the believer is ignorant about the information that defends his beliefs or faith and is fast losing the argument. You see, the defense mechanism for ignorance is hyperactivity, especially when put on the spot and asked to perform. Conversely, wisdom and knowledge produces a calm demeanor and disposition. That hyperactivity might manifest as aggressive behavior on the part of the believer against the freethinker, be it verbal or physical abuse. This scenario, unfortunately, happens all too often. Those who now buy into the personal religion ideology might ask themselves, why join a people in a religion who don't know anything, even about their own worship, when I know a lot more on my own, with me being more open-minded? Now, this is not to say that those who practice the personal religion ideology are good people while those in organized religion are bad, or that the points they use in debating organized religion practitioners are flawless or foolproof. Of course, the second reason referred to here is a subjective reason. But with respect to the first point highlighted, that is hypocrisy, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that organized religion is rife with hypocrisy. That is, saying one thing and doing another. Now the question is this: can God accept the worship of someone who does not belong to any organized religion, even if that person is very sincere? Will God accept the worship of a person who worships alone and obstinately refuses to become a member of any organized religion? Let's consider it. Let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 33 and 40. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 33 reads, "For God is a God not of disorder but of peace, as in all the congregations of the holy ones." 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 40 reads, "But let all things take place decently and by arrangement." From these verses we see that God is not a God of disorder, and that he likes his worship to take place decently and by arrangement. Let's read some more verses. Let's read Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 9. The next verse to be read, we've read before, so let's read a part of it. Let's read Ephesians chapter 4 verse 5. And let's read the book of Zechariah chapter 8 verse 23. Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 9 reads, "For then I will change the language of the peoples to a pure language, so that all of them may call on the name of Jehovah, to serve him shoulder to shoulder." Ephesians chapter 4 verse 5 reads, "One Lord, one faith, one baptism." The book of Zechariah chapter 8 verse 23 reads, "This is what Jehovah of armies says. In those days 10 men out of all the languages of the nations will take hold. Yes, they will take firm hold of the robe of a Jew, saying, 'We want to go with you people, for we have heard that God is with you people.'" Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 9 talks about many people serving Jehovah shoulder to shoulder, that is, worshiping him in unity. To achieve this, God will change the language of these peoples to a pure language. This is another way of saying that all the people would be taught to embrace the one true faith described in Ephesians chapter 4 verse 5. That is, they would then be taught to have the same body of beliefs. Zechariah chapter 8 verse 23 says that those who were not true worshippers took the initiative to join themselves to the Jew, which represents a person giving God acceptable worship, having heard that God is with him or them. The direct benefit of fellowship is the positive feedback loop, the encouragement, the team spirit, so to speak, This benefit is described in Hebrews chapter 10 verse 24 and 25. Let's read it. The book of Hebrews chapter 10 verse 24 and 25 reads, "And let us consider one another so as to incite to love and fine works, not forsaking our meeting together as some have the custom, but encouraging one another, and all the more so as you see the day drawing near." Let's also look at how the Amplified Bible puts it. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 24 and 25, the Amplified Bible reads, "And let us consider how we may encourage one another to love and to do good deeds, not forsaking our meeting together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." This verse talks about the meeting together of worshippers. Why? It is so that they can encourage one another to love and to do good deeds. What are some of these good deeds? Let's read 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 22. 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 22 reads, "So flee from youthful desires, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a clean heart." Let's see how the contemporary English version of the Bible renders it. The book of 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 22, the contemporary English version reads, "Run from temptations that capture young people. Always do the right thing. Be faithful, loving, and easy to get along with. Worship with people whose hearts are pure." You see how this Bible renders it? Worship with people whose hearts are pure. The good deeds encouraged include flight from youthful desires, pursuit of righteousness, faith, love, and peace. But one does not pursue these good deeds solo, on his own, or by himself. Well, it can be clearer. This Bible verse is more of a command. Fellowship with people who share your beliefs is what God approves. So belonging to an organized religion is much better than being on your own. Now, what has been said so far? Number one, God does not accept worship equally from a group of similar religions, be it Christianity, Islam, or others. Number two, at any point in time, God accepts worship from only one religion. We would call it the true religion. The rest, however, are false or fake or counterfeit. As was explained in the video, if Christianity is the true religion, then one of its denominations is actually giving God the worship he loves. The rest are false or fake. If Islam is the true religion, then one of its sects is giving God the worship he accepts, while the rest are counterfeit. Number three, you must believe that your religion is the one true religion. Number four, if unsure about the credentials of your religion as the one God approves, and you persist in that religion or you gallivant about, your worship is futile or useless. Number five, people not worshiping God acceptably for whatever reason are basically worshiping Satan, the devil, and his demons. Number six, personal religion is not the way God approves. So the challenge is on each and every one of us to be sure of where we are. We should also know that if we definitely believe that our religion is the one true religion with the rest being false, this will draw intense opposition and scrutiny from naysayers, and we should be prepared to do what is recorded in 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 15. 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 15 reads, "But sanctify the Christ as Lord in your hearts, always ready to make a defense before everyone who demands of you a reason for the hope you have, but doing so with a mild temper and deep respect." This verse says that we need to know our faith well enough to defend it in a calm and respectful manner. The question for us to ponder is this: is your religion the one true religion? At this point, I want to say thanks for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe, and recommend this video and my channel to your family and friends. Hope you Salt, signing out.